Okay, we'll just wait a few minutes for everyone to arrive before we get started. Let's give it 2 minutes, so we'll get started at 11:02 Singapore time. Okay, let's get started. Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this third webinar in this series of Scopus webinars that we've set up, which we're doing every 2 weeks now. Today's webinar is specifically about author profiles. And if you look at the other topics that we've covered, the next topics in the next coming weeks will be journal analysis, metrics, institutional profiles, advanced search, search alerts, and funding acknowledgements. If you're interested in the previous webinars that we did, and if you were not able to join, we do have the recordings, so you can sign up to have access to the recordings. So if you don't know who I am, my name's Alexander, and I'm a senior consultant for research intelligence. You might be getting used to my face. I noticed when we were doing the looking at the attendees that I think a lot of the same people attend each week, so that's kind of nice thing. For us, it's also become a routine now to be presenting from home and communicating virtually through these very interesting times. Luckily, it's not just me. I'm joined by my colleagues. Do you guys want to quickly introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Derek. Derek Duncombe, Marketing Development Manager based in the Singapore office. I look after Southeast Asia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicholas. I'm the customer consultant for RSS, and I'm based in Singapore.
Okay.
Sorry, just as a quick reminder, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. At the same time, we will not entertain any email addresses that start with a Gmail or Hotmail addresses. Yeah. So please input your institutional email addresses if you want to have the recordings, the past recordings, and the future recordings for as you go along the next webinars.
So along the way, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll tackle them whenever there are pauses during the session itself. So please, if you have any questions, write them in.
Okay, if you haven't already seen the Elsevier COVID-19 resource hub, please go there and have a look, especially if you're involved in any research related to vaccines or other areas related to COVID-19. There's a lot of information here. It's really more than you could imagine from just looking at this page, and a lot of freely usable things. So that's always there. And we've also launched a Pure portal. So it's a research portal that helps people to find papers, people and organizations doing research in fields related to COVID-19, which is also freely available. So if that interests you, you can access that via the link in the top left, and we will share these slides after the session, so you don't have to remember it now necessarily. The good news today is that I don't have many slides, so I'm going to attempt to be somewhat spontaneous, and I've warned Nicholas that I might ask him to just fill in the gaps if I go blank. So let's see how it goes, but as always, let's start with an introduction. Today we're talking about Scopus, right? And in case there are people here that don't know what Scopus is, it's a source neutral abstract and citation database. So it is a web-based tool that includes a lot of metadata of scientific literature, journals, books, conference proceedings, which are published by many different publishers, 5,000 different publishers, about 24,000 journals or serial titles. It's curated content in that it's selected carefully by people, so you can submit a journal to Scopus, but it needs to pass quite a rigorous quality control process. So you can be confident that everything you find in Scopus is genuine peer-reviewed science, which is not the case if you look in some other places. And the use cases are, well, there's quite a wide range of use cases that I'll cover in the next slide, but I think it's good to point out that Scopus is unique in the fact that it doesn't just have let's say the articles or papers, but it has affiliation profiles and author profiles. And today we're focusing on the author profiles. Typical use cases of Scopus, and this is not comprehensive, so somewhat simplistic, but you got to start somewhere, right? Researchers to track their own performance and developments in the field, to identify collaborators, identify journals. Librarians, it's really often a resource to help provide a system which is providing workflow efficiency to the research system and feeding high quality data into their own systems. But it's also used, let's say, by the management of universities and governments to look high level at the performance of countries and institutions and individual researchers. So in order to do that, you need to have high quality profiles. So if we want to evaluate an individual, or if you want to set a KPI for an individual or for an institution, there must be some way to define and identify the papers that belong to the institution or the researcher. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about researcher profiles or author profiles. Before I move on, I'm interested to know who the attendees are today. So I'm going to launch a quick poll. And if you could quickly indicate what role would describe you the best. We're always curious who joins us here, and I'll leave this poll open for a minute or two. Okay, I'll leave it open for 10 more seconds. Okay. So here we see that 54% of the people here are researchers, which is fantastic. I think Scopus is a good research tool. I actually used it myself when I was doing my master's degree in the Netherlands. It was an interesting time where I worked in the Scopus team, and I was part-time doing my master's degree. So when I wrote my thesis, I got to use the same tool that we were helping to develop. 24% of you are students. Welcome. 7% are professors, and 14% are librarians, and 2% are, let's say, administrators or research managers. I think it's fair to say that these are all roles in which Scopus can help with doing various things. I think the things which I show on this slide here, these use cases are somewhat simplistic. We know that there are a lot of very specific ways in which people use Scopus. And if you have questions about any of that, or if you want to comment, just be welcome to use the chat function to engage us. I'll move on for the poll, but appreciate your participation. Wait, I gotta close it. So author profiles. As mentioned, Scopus has affiliation as well as author profiles. It's a data model in which we have, let's say, 78 million, items or papers in Scopus, and each paper is associated to one or more author profiles. So if the paper was written by 4 different authors, it would be linked to 4 different author profiles. What that does is if you link from the paper to the profile, you can see a profile about the individual, and you can see all of the papers which they've produced, and you can see some statistics about the researcher's field and performance and so forth. The same is true for the affiliations. The papers, each paper is linked to one or more affiliations based on the address and affiliation line in the paper, right? Which is also linked to the author, because often in the paper you see the author name, you see a letter, and then that letter is linked to an affiliation. So you have this relationship between papers, author profiles, and affiliation profiles to represent that in terms of the data that's in Scopus. So that really helps to provide, on the one hand, from an analytics point of view, it means that you can create a map of science that includes institutions and individuals. From maybe a search and discovery point of view, if you as a student or researcher are looking for content, you're looking to read, and you find a paper and you think this is really, really exactly the type of paper that I want to read, because this is what I'm trying to learn about. I want to read all the papers or look at all the other papers which this person has produced. Having profiles makes that very easy thing to do. There are about 16 million profiles in Scopus. They are algorithmically created so that every researcher that has published at least one paper in any of the 23,000 titles which are indexed in Scopus will have an author profile, right? The author profiles are highly precise and complete, where the algorithm maximizes precision. So that's to say, we want every profile to have only the papers of one particular person. We really want to avoid mixing up 2 people with the same name into one profile. So precision is about 99%. But maximizing precision means that sometimes an author might have more than one profile, because when a new paper is loaded into Scopus and the algorithm is not highly confident it belongs in an existing profile, it will create a new profile. And in that case, if you search for the author name, you might see 2 results for the same person. The good news is that the algorithm is just the start of the author profiles, because users and authors themselves can provide feedback and make changes to the profiles just within Scopus.com. And that's something I'll show you how to do. And I think it's very important as researchers to realize you have these profiles. They represent your work, they're in Scopus. And to go there and find your profile, make sure it's correct, is an important thing, because universities do use them for evaluations. Governments do use them to identify researchers as candidates for whatever programs they have. So this type of evaluation is already happening. So it's quite good to kind of just check, your own data and make sure it's complete. And that's the last slide I have. So I'm going to attempt to smoothly move to Scopus.com and show you how some of this stuff works. I'm going to move the little window here. Derek and Nicholas, can you confirm you see Scopus? Cool. All right. So this is Scopus, Scopus.com. So if you, most of you are coming from universities that subscribe to Scopus, which has IP access. Probably there's been some kind of access provided to allow you to get access from home. I realize a lot of us are not going to the workplace at the moment, but it's basically scopus.com. When you get there, you have a search page, documents, authors, affiliations, and advanced search. In this case, we want to search for authors. So our usage statistics show that one of the main things that researchers search for in Scopus is themselves. I think that's awesome. There's no problem in that. And I don't have any papers in Scopus. It's something I really want to change, but it means I can't show you my profile. I can search for my professor. So Professor Richard Rieder-Inkhoff is a professor at the Department of Psychology in Amsterdam. Now I can first start with just a last name and a first letter. And I see one search result here. So I see one profile for Richard Rieder-Inkhoff, and if I click through to it, it opens up a author profile page that provides a lot of information about the researcher. So here we see the, let's say, the display name. Here's the unique author ID. So that's a unique number in Scopus that represents this particular profile. We can see that the affiliation or current affiliation that Richard Rieder-Inkhoff is linked to is the Universiteit van Amsterdam, which means the University of Amsterdam. We can see that there are other name formats for this author, including Rieder-Inkhoff, K. Richard, Richard Rieder-Inkhoff, K. Rieder-Inkhoff, Richard K, and so forth. So the algorithm has identified that all of those different ways that Richard Rieder-Inkhoff, his name is indicated in the actual articles in Scopus, right? You have to keep in mind these articles come from 23,000 different journals or different formats. But it's been identified as these are mapped to this profile. And it's a pretty good profile. 187 papers. We see that Richard's got an H-index of 60. He is quite a senior researcher. And we can see over the years from when he started doing research in 1991, he published one paper. His peak of papers was 22 in 2012. And he was complaining to me that his management responsibilities at the university meant that he had to focus on managing a whole department of like 60 people, and he couldn't do as much research anymore. So he was quite frustrated with that. But he is still co-authoring with a lot of his postdocs and other researchers. So that gives kind of a high-level view of his history, but here are all of his papers, which currently are sorted by date, but I could easily resort his papers and see that this paper that he published in Science, which was about the role of the medial frontal cortex in cognitive control, this was what he called his citation classic. He got cited a lot of times for this review that he was invited by Science to write. But point being, it was pretty easy to find all the papers of a particular person. Richard is very specialized in writing papers about neurocognitive aging. So that's the science of which mental capacities tend to decline with normal aging. And that's linked to very specific parts of the brain and very specific abilities, which I found fascinating and partly wrote my thesis about myself. But because his topic is specific, if you find one of his papers in Scopus, it's pretty easy to link to his profile and just, you know, find all the other papers. And it's also pretty easy to, for example, if I open this paper, Right, and I think, well, I already know Richard papers, but I want to look at S. Nievenhuis. I could just click on Nievenhuis and it will open Sander. He's got the same name as me, Sander Nievenhuis, of Leiden University. So it's pretty easy to link to this author's profile and find all their papers. Now, additionally, there's a couple things you could do. You can save the author to an author list, which I believe has the function of being able to track specific authors that you're interested in. Is that right, Nicholas? He's nodding. All right. I was trying to get him to come off mute and like join, but he wants me to do it. You can export the profile to Scopus, but you can set some pretty cool alerts. So if we set a citation alert, let's pretend that I'm Sander Nievenhuis and I want to get Scopus to email me every time that I get cited, like a new citation, then I can set this alert up. Here it says citations for Sander Nievenhuis. It's going to be sent to my email address here. And I can say, well, I get a lot of emails, so I just want to do it every month. But then I'm going to get an alert for all the papers which have cited my work, which is kind of a cool thing to do. And very easy. To set these things up, you do need to log in. So you can see here, I am logged into Scopus, which means it knows who I am and it knows where to email me. I can set a document alert. So let's say that Sander Nievenhuis is someone that I follow closely and I want to receive an email every time this author has published a new paper. And I also want to do that once a month and on the first of the month. And I can set that alert. So those are some pretty easy things to do. You can provide feedback. So let's pretend that I'm Sander Nievenhuis. I'm actually not. I'm Sander van der Vellen, but two Dutch names, you wouldn't know the difference maybe. So you can provide feedback on your profile. So what will you be able to do? You could change the preferred name. You could merge profiles. So if you have more than one author profile, you can combine them into one. You can add and remove documents. So if you see, hey, you know, I see a paper that's by a different Sander, that's not me. You can remove that paper from your profile, or you could just keep it there and illegitimately claim it's yours, but we do not recommend that. You can update the affiliation. So if it says, if you recently moved from one university to another and it still says, you know, UM, but you're now at NUS, you can change that. So how does that work? Let's say I want to change the preferred name. Actually, I like it with the first name. So is this me or am I doing it for someone else? Now, I could lie and say it's me, but that wouldn't be a good thing to do. So I'll be honest and say I'm actually doing this on behalf of Sander Nievenhuis because I saw something that wasn't quite right in his profile. So you can select which document should be included. So in the scenario that this document does not belong to this profile, you can unselect it, right? So that's one thing. You can also search for missing documents. So if you are a researcher and you have 5 papers and you go into Scopus and see that your profile has 4 papers, you're missing 1 paper, you can search for that paper here. Right, so if I said, well, you know, there it is, add that paper to this profile, then you could do that. But I wouldn't recommend me completing this because it's not his paper and I don't want to just start adding stuff. These requests do have a level of quality control by teams at Scopus to ensure that the feedback that's requested is correct. So if you were to ask for something to be done which is incorrect, you're likely to receive an email from an Elsevier team saying, hey, you're trying to, you know, merge 2 people together and I think they're actually different people. Can you provide some evidence to back up why you want to have this done. Now, these are the affiliations which Sander Nieuwenhuis can choose to have as his, say, current affiliation in Scopus. It's based on the affiliations in his paper. So if Sander just moved to Singapore and joined NUS, but has not published at NUS yet, probably you can't change it to NUS yet. So it would stay at Leiden University. But he can choose these other affiliations which he has published with. To make those changes, it's as simple as pressing confirm and submit. And generally they're made within a week or less, which is great. I think in 2006, when I joined Scopus and the profiles were launched, we didn't have this type of feedback wizard, and actually there was a simple form in which people wrote text about the changes that they wanted to make to their profile, and that ended up in an inbox which was my inbox. So that was my responsibility to deal with all of that in quite a manual way. And now and it took us about 3 weeks to make changes back then, and now it takes just a number of days, and everything's quite easy for you to do yourself in this author feedback wizard. So now I've searched for Richard Ridder-Inckhoff, just for Ridder-Inckhoff, the last name, and we see a couple of Ridder-Inckhoffs, Herman and Wim and Anna. So I don't want to merge them, but I do see Richard Ridder-Inckhoff here, University of Amsterdam. And if I look at this title of the paper, I am very confident that this Richard Ridder-Inckhoff of the University of Amsterdam is the same as this Richard Ridder-Inckhoff from the University of Amsterdam. So what happened is this paper got loaded into Scopus, and the algorithm was not confident enough to match it to this profile. So it created a new profile. But as we search for the author, we can very clearly see that that person is the same person. So I'm going to select them and request to merge authors. So it will ask me to confirm all of this, and the same thing that we saw for Sander Nieuwenhuis, you can search for missing documents and that. But the only change I want to make at this point is combining those profiles. See, so now it says that I've made this request. It's been received, that I will receive an email at my email address. If it requires manual review, so if I asked for something very funky, then it's going to go to the team of people, you know, actual human beings that need to look at whether what has been asked is correct. But in the vast majority of cases where you're asking for something to be merged, which is clearly correct, it automatically will be done within a few days. And you'll receive an email to confirm that it's been done. Nicholas, do you have anything you want to add at this point?
Yeah, actually. So if you go back by one link back to the main author page, sorry, to the main search for authors.
Sure.
Yeah. So if you go to the bottom, you notice that there is a green bar called ORCID. So what Sander has walked through actually is a perfect use case where ORCID would become very in handy with, for the very simple reason that ORCID itself is a third-party collaborator that we work with, and they disambiguate author names. So what happens when you say you have a Ridder-Inckhoff Richard, Ridder-Inckhoff R, and sometimes, you know, we don't really know if these are the same person. So we really encourage people who actually have profiles to go onto ORCID. And it's a very simple 3-step process where they can create the ID. They will receive a digital identifier similar to what we call a passport, similar to your passport number, really. And you can use this basically to create a single sign-in, and this you can use this to actually basically clean up your profiles as well. So this is something that we encourage everyone to do. So you see that some of the authors on Scopus, they actually have ORCID IDs, some don't. If you feel that you don't, and you feel that this will be useful, please go log on to ORCID. It's actually a very powerful platform.
Thank you, Nicholas. And you can connect your author profile to your ORCID ID here. And you can actually enable that the content which is automatically loaded into Scopus gets pushed into the ORCID profile, so that the ORCID profile will at least have the content that is published in Scopus index journals automatically loaded there. So you can see that actually Richard has not made that link, but many others have. Do you have a name, Nicholas, of someone that has an ORCID profile? You can show what it looks like. Did Vouchy have it? Yeah, cool.
You can try Fauci or Prof. Fauci. I think both of them have ORCIDs.
Vouchy, what's his first letter?
A.
A, Anthony, right? Yeah. So I've been seeing this guy a lot on TV. Oh no, he doesn't, does he?
Try Prof. Fauci.
Fauzi, all right.
Yeah.
Fauzi, first name? I can't hear you.
I think it's A.
Eh?
Yeah.
But there's going to be a lot of them. Like,
We'll see. We'll see.
good point.
Yes, that's the one, I think.
Okay.
76 index.
Here.
There we go.
So here we see that Ismail, Fauzi Ismail UTM has linked the Scopus author profile. So that's his profile number. Got all the same stuff that we showed before. But it is connected to his ORCID profile, so you can link from Scopus to ORCID, and can also make that synchronization so that the content from Scopus is pushed automatically into ORCID, which means he wouldn't need to, type in manually. A couple other points to mention is, let's see, we can analyze the author. So there's a button there. So here we see Fauzi's profile with some analytics, some very basic analytics, but interesting stuff. So we can see that 76 papers have 76 citations or more. So that's very, very impressive. Hats off to Prof. Fauzi. We can see the number of citations. We can see the documents by journal. So we can see which journals that he's published in the most. And believe we can link through to some of this stuff. So if we wanted to see the list of co-authors or dig down into which subject areas, we can see it. These are the subject areas. So the profiles give you access to the papers, show some analytics, and again, the starting quality is good. And I think one of the things that we found very important to do with Scopus is to ensure that everyone has a profile, right? It doesn't make sense if only some authors have a profile and others don't, because then if people are searching or making evaluations, it's unfair because it would only highlight the people that have a profile. But we very much encourage every researcher to go into Scopus and have a look at your profile and perfect it. Make sure that you're happy with it. And should you have trouble with it, I think you know our email, so you can ask and we'll be happy to give a bit more explanation. I think with that, I've covered the basics. Is there anything that I've left out, Nicholas?
Not that I can think of, but I'm sure there'll be lots of questions that are coming through, so we can probably tackle them along the way.
Should we move to the questions then? All right, let's do that.
Let's move to the questions. One very basic question, Sander, which I saw a couple of them already. So how do you get to that first page itself? How do I go to this author page?
All right.
Can you just go to the very start?
Yeah. So you go to your browser and you go to www.scopus. Now, it remembered that I was searching for authors, but very likely you're going to see this page. If you see a different page where it's showing you preview and saying check if you have access, probably you don't have access to Scopus, or you're trying to access it outside of the IP range. In that case, I would recommend that you give your librarian a call or email them and ask them, how can I get access to Scopus, because it doesn't seem to be working. When you have access, this is the landing page for Scopus, right? And it would by default be set to searching by documents. So it's very easy to search for authors. You press this author button here, and it remembered that I searched for Fawzi, but that's as easy as it is. Scopus.com, you will land at the search page, press the button there for authors, fill in the last name. So if we're looking for some really common Chinese name, you might want to fill in the affiliation, like National University of Singapore or whatever it is, and that will narrow down your results. And you can also choose to look at only exact matches.
Thanks, Sander. Next question. Okay, there are a couple of questions here revolving around the same thing, and this is the confusion over author profile. How is it generated? Is it generated by the system, or is it a manual input by the author?
That's a good question. And it's an important one to clarify. The profiles are created by the system. So they are created by an algorithm based on the information that's in the papers which have been loaded into Scopus. However, as a researcher, you can edit your profile. So if there are any things which are imperfect about your profile, you can go and make those changes using the author profile wizard, which we just demonstrated.
Sander, just a quick jump on. What is the minimum threshold for an author profile to be generated? So how many publications has to be had before you can actually generate an author profile?
One paper and it will have a profile in the data, but I think 2 papers for the profile to show up in the author search.
And also just to add on to that, whatever Nicholas mentioned earlier about registering on ORCID ID, essentially is like your identity card, your passport, if you will. So with that, you can actually have access to all papers that you have written, okay, attributed to you. Okay, next question. This person has an article missing from Scopus Index and requested the article to be added sometime back in the beginning of the year in January, but until now it's not been updated. How long does it normally take for this process to take place?
So missing content. So I have to clarify that I'm not sure. Do they mean that they had the content was in 2 different profiles and they merged it? That would be relatively quickly. In the scenario in which the paper which they published is not in Scopus, like it's missing, and that can happen. Missing content requests take a little bit longer, but it should be a number of weeks. It shouldn't take longer than that. I do think that the whole world is a bit upside down at the moment, including some of our processes to add content and such. So I have seen that some content corrections took a little bit longer than they normally would. So if you have the ticket number from that request to add the content, feel free to forward it to me in an email so that I can send it to the responsible team and ask them to have a look at it. But the way to actually ask for these things to do is
There's time for us to ask questions, just in case we didn't start already yet.
So, Nicholas, you do this more often than me. If they want to add, if there's missing documents, right? They can fill in a form, author profile correction, document correction. But I remember you can link to that form directly from here.
So what I normally do, which might not be the best way to do it, is to email the teams directly. So there's actually a team called the author feedback at scopus.com. That's the team that I actually work with. So
Okay.
basically, at the end of the day, you always need to submit your PDF. You need to explain very specifically what has been omitted. So sometimes authors would submit articles that were indexed elsewhere, but not on Scopus. So you need to make sure that first and foremost, the article which you have submitted to the journal, that journal that you have submitted your article to, is actually indexed on Scopus. That's the most important thing. And you need to make sure that it's still being actively indexed on Scopus. That's the second caveat.
And there are links to email here. There's also a chat function to ask for help within a chat, which I think is increasingly used and quite responsive. So there's always people to help you, either by emailing us if you need to, or using the live chat here in these help pages. So this is a Scopus support center. And a lot of the questions that you have, we believe the information will be available here. That doesn't mean you can't ask us. You're free to ask us whatever you want to, but this resource is here and you link directly to it from scopus.com, just here for customer service to link to there.
Thanks, Sander and Nick. Just to move on very quickly, there are more and more questions that are coming in fast and furious. Okay, I'm just trying to aggregate some of the questions here. So there's a couple of people who are asking about how do I actually, hang on, yeah. How do we update our affiliation if we move from one place to another working institution? And what will happen to the previous papers that were published when they were in the previous institution?
So once you move to a new institution and once you publish a paper there, the main affiliation of the author profile can change. And the profile, so the profile recognizes that people move, right? That it doesn't matter if you move from 5 different universities in 3 different countries. All of the papers that you've published at any of those affiliations should be in the same profile. So if I look at I think he's always been at the same university. Do you have an example, Nicholas? Somebody who's moved?
No, I actually don't have any write-off.
Professor Chua.
Oh yeah, Prof. Chua, yeah. Yeah, Chua CK. C is fine, yeah. I think he's now at SUTD. Chua CK, yeah, number 3. I think he's updated to SUTD as it is.
So you can see that he has worked at NTU for a long time, but also published for Singapore Center for 3D Printing and SUTD. And the profile recognizes that all those papers are the same author, but that the author either has multiple affiliations or has moved around. So that is not a problem at all. in short. I hope that clarifies.
Okay, thanks, Sander. Next one. One of the basic questions here is, if I were to search for something in the author in the search engine, would it lead to the Scopus page of a prominent researcher? That means the first one that pops up there, would that be the most prominent researcher?
Most prominent, I think not necessarily.
That means, for example, if I were to search for Chua C, as what you just did,
yeah.
would the first one be the most prominent researcher named Chua C?
No, not necessarily. So here well, I think it's search relevance if I'm right, but no, actually it's a document count here. So you can sort your results by different factors here. And right now it's set to documents. So we can see that the profile that has 824 documents is, you know, higher than the one with 484, higher than the one with 386. If you consider document count to be prominence, then yes. But it doesn't say anything about quality. And you can also do it by H-index. So if you're interested in doing it by prominence or some quality measure, we can see that matching my search of Chua C, the author profile with the highest H-index is now at the top.
Okay, thanks, Sander. Okay, a couple of questions here that just came in, right? So I think there's still some confusion over who can actually amend the author's name and last name. And a couple of people have said that their name was spelled with different abbreviations. And another one is, who authorizes this merge author kind of function? So basically they're all related. So can you just demonstrate that again?
Sure. So both you as an author as well as someone else can give feedback. And so far, we don't really have many problems with that. I know that some people worry and say, well, if someone else give feedback, maybe you're going to change my profile wrong. But I think the research community overall are relatively, not too mean to other people and stealing their papers and such. That all said, there are quality control measures in place that when requests are made, especially when it's not the author himself, and we're not sure whether that request is correct, then it will go through a manual review by a team of people to prevent that any incorrect changes are made to the profiles. But if I wanted to change Professor Chua's profile, and I hope he's not on the call, and if he is, don't worry, I'm not going to change anything. All right, so it's asking me, are you, am I Professor Chua? And I'm not. So you say, no, I'm submitting this on behalf of someone else. So I can do that. If I see that something is not correct in Scopus or imperfect, I can give feedback. And again, there are processes in place to ensure that low confidence requests are validated by a team of people. And so far, the results in that are very positive. We don't really experience many problems in that area.
Okay, thanks, Sander. Okay, next question. I have Scopus profile and I've also have an ORCID ID. But from this session, I have a feeling that I can have different analytics other than Scopus in ORCID page. Is this so?
Yeah, so Scopus can include all the papers that are published in Scopus journals, right? So ORCID can include all that as well as any other content, right? So there's no selection process or limitation on what you can put in ORCID. So therefore, the Scopus profile could be a subset of what's in ORCID if you enter in more content into ORCID. So therefore, if you were to do some kind of analytics and look at, my Scopus author profile has like 50 papers and my ORCID profile has got 76 papers, that's perfectly possible.
Okay, so next question. There are two questions that are almost related. So first one is, I searched for my author profile, but there's no Scopus ID, only ORCID ID. So how do I search for my Scopus ID? That's the first question. Second question is, can I change my name in Scopus to link with my profile in other databases such as Web of Science?
All right, so you don't see an author ID. Let's go back to step one, and I'm going to go back to so I'm not sure whether the person means that they don't see any profile that matches them or whether they don't see the ID number in the profile. But if you do search and let's say you don't find yourself in the search results, then maybe you want to search for the paper that you wrote. So let me use as an example. All right. It's got a lot of authors. Wasn't a good example, but let's say I couldn't find my author profile and I can find the paper in Scopus, right? So if I search for a consensus guide to capturing the ability to inhibit actions and impulse behaviors, and I find that paper in Scopus, and I find my name, I'm pretending I'm Richard, I'm not, but then I just click there and it will open my profile. If you cannot find yourself in Scopus and you cannot find any of your papers in Scopus, it may be that the journals that you've published in are not indexed in Scopus. So it's very important. I think, as Nicholas said, check what content is included in Scopus. You can do that here in sources.
Okay.
Another thing is you have the author ID here. So if you know what your author ID is, right? And we're going to copy paste this. If we then go to search and go to advanced search, if you wanted to search for an author ID, you can use a af-id operator and the profile number. That didn't work, sorry, but I don't know why. All right, I have no explanation for that. We'll pretend it didn't happen and move on to the next question.
Okay, next question. I've created an account in the Scopus profile. When I search for it, it only appears one of my Scopus paper. In fact, a few papers are missing. So how?
Nicholas?
Yeah, I've answered this actually in the chat because it was duplicated across both. Yeah.
I see. Okay, if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A, because in the chat sometimes, if it's coming fast and furious, it's going to be very difficult to answer both simultaneously. Question, can I refer to Schemago to know the journal's quartile or any other way? I think today's topic is on author's profile. So I'm going to focus all the questions on that first. If there's time, then we'll answer questions that are out of this topic area. Is that okay? To be fair to the people who are actually attending this.
Yeah, I can quickly answer that. If you go to sources and you get a list of all the journals in Scopus, and you can use this filter here to look at the quartile, but the quartile is based on site score, not on SJR. We do have SJR and SNP in Scopus for every journal, but our quartiles are based on CiteScore. And they are correct that if they want to look at the journal quartile based on SJR, that is provided on the Schemago website.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question is, what happens to articles that are no longer indexed in Scopus? Okay, again, never mind. Okay, just for your information, just to answer on that very quickly, there is actually a list, okay, on discontinued titles that are not in Scopus, things that are either in Scopus and things that are not in Scopus. There's a list for that listed on the page on scopus.com. Yeah. Okay, next question. How long does it take to update a newly added missing doc? I think that was answered earlier. Okay, next question. How do I attach my Scopus ID into my profile? There seems to be some confusion around this. So maybe you want to just reiterate one more time, Sander? I think they're not really getting it.
All right. Let's maybe go back here. So again, content gets loaded into Scopus from 23,000 different journals. So that content gets sent to Scopus, and it goes through a content enrichment process in which we create profiles for every author and for every institution. And we link every reference to the paper that it refers to, which is what citation linking is. That's an automatic process. So essentially, you don't need to do anything. If you have papers that were published in a journal that's indexed in Scopus, then you will have a profile in Scopus. It's a matter of finding that profile, and if you want to claim it as your own and link it to ORCID or change the preferred name or affiliation, then you can use the process which we showed today. So let me just be clear. The process I showed is just if you want to make changes to your profile. If you don't do that, you will still have a profile if you publish papers in a journal that's published in a Scopus index journal. For those of you who are saying, well, I have papers, but I went into Scopus and I don't see a profile, then please check if you can find the individual papers, right? So search for the title of the paper, and there you will see the names of the authors. If you click on your name, it will link to your profile. If you can't find any of your papers, please check if the journals that you published in are indexed in Scopus by going to the Scopus journal title list, which you can either search for on any search engine or go to elsevier.com. And you should be able to find the complete list of journals that are indexed in Scopus. Or otherwise, you can, I think as I showed before, go here to sources. Sorry, it's upset with me changing Windows all the time, and now it wants me to sign in. But you can go to sources, and it will show you the list of journals so that you can search for a specific title or ISSN to check if the journal that you published in is indeed indexed in Scopus.
Okay, thanks, Sander. So I think we've got time for just one last question or so. So this question is, does the citation in the Scopus articles on the Scopus profile and is it equivalent to Google Scholar? If not, how do we make it equal?
That's a great question. They are not equal because so Scopus citations include citations only from other papers which are indexed in Scopus, right? So it's an ecosystem. All of the papers that are in Scopus are published in journals which have made it through the content selection process. So they are high quality journals. That means that your author profile includes only papers that are published in high quality journals and the citations from other high quality journals, all which are indexed in Scopus. For Google, Google includes all kinds of stuff. There, to our knowledge, is no content selection process. There is no list of journals or content available, so you can see what is in there and what's not. So it would include any content, regardless of whether it's published in a genuine peer-reviewed journal or in a predatory journal or subpar quality journal. So the numbers in Google may be higher, and some people like that. I understand. They're like, well, number in Google much higher, but arguably that includes content which is of lesser quality or perhaps even predatory in nature, while in Scopus we do our best to ensure that's not the case, and that's the fundamental difference.
Thank you very much, Sander. It's now time. So you want to say anything?
Yeah, it's 12 o'clock. So I think my voice is sore from talking so much. I think I'm going to get Nicholas to talk more next time. And we hope that it was helpful today. It's getting kind of fun to have these webinars once a week. And from us, we hope that everyone is well and healthy, and that this was helpful to you. We will send out an email to you with the slides, as well as a link to the recording.
Yeah, and for those of you who already have the email that actually gives the list of all the upcoming webinars, perhaps you might want to look at it, look at the topic, and if you have any questions, plan them in advance, and then drop us a note the next time around. Yeah. So for now, thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.